Yeah, okay. I guess we could start the same way. I have some notes from the chapter, so I could read them aloud first.
Yeah, sure.
The first kind of interesting distinction he makes is that while usually bishops are thought of as either bad or good bishops, he talks about active, useful, and tall pawn bishops. And obviously active bishops are just great bishops that are doing a lot of stuff, like on active diagonals, and like for an example, breathing fire down a long diagonal. And useful bishops aren't necessarily active, but they are doing an important job, like holding an important central pawn. Like this, there's that saying that bad bishops support good pawns, which is often true. There's stuff like in the Nimzo Indian, often your light squared bishop on b7 supports your central pawns and makes like e4 really difficult to play because your d5 pawn is supported by the bishop on b7 and so forth. And it looks bad, but it serves an important purpose.
Yeah.
The second point that I hadn't really thought of before was that pawn moves always affect at least some bishop's scope in the future or in the present. So if you move any pawn at any point in the game, that will inevitably kind of affect the access to a diagonal at some point. And that was kind of like, when you think about it, it's obvious. Like, for an example, if on the position that's still on the board, that's going to be the first position we're going to be looking at. If you play f6, obviously, well, that shuts down your dark squared bishop from that diagonal. Well, it's already closed, but, but you get the idea. Then another idea that hadn't really occurred to me before reading Reassess are pawn sacrifices to open diagonals. Of course, that often isn't a good idea, but when this is a really good idea, you get beautiful open diagonals for your bishops, and often that's worth more than a pawn. Of course, it depends completely on everything, but yeah. Then there's the example of a bishop controlling like 16 billion pawns at the same time in the book that I thought was a pretty good example of how bishops can control like huge amounts of squares at once compared to knights, which can prevent a pawn formation from moving, but it's way more difficult for them. Other stuff. Useful bishops are often undervalued, I think. I certainly undervalue them. When you look at a bishop that's staring at a pawn or something, you think, okay, that's a bad bishop, but that's not necessarily true because it's doing an important job. And there was like a famously difficult example in the, which I haven't read, but in Mastering Chess Strategy, where like Kasparov accepts a like terrible looking bishop because he thinks having a bishop hold his two backward pawns is so important and so forth. I don't remember the example at all, but sometimes like so-called bad bishops are actually really important pieces, and they can always, well, often at least, free themselves later on. Other stuff, bishop maneuvers are a thing which don't necessarily occur to you so much because, like, I don't know, it's so obvious at this point that you're going to be maneuvering your knights, and knights take multiple moves to reach a good point, but especially in like some Karpov games I've looked at, there have been like many bishop maneuvers where he kind of just moves bishops like kind of dorkily, like one square at a time to reach a good diagonal. I've seen Karpov do that. Yeah, there's that. I should link it to you. Sometimes there's that one funny game where in like the Reassess he makes like 8 backward knight moves and then like 7 bishop moves that like move the bishop by 1 square, and it's kind of a hilarious like ultra Karpovian like maneuvering game. But yeah, he does that sometimes, and it's kind of. With knights, maneuvers are often more obvious, I think, and easier to kind of understand. But with bishops, you don't necessarily like it's not so visually obvious that that square you're maneuvering to is so much better. Well, another kind of easy to misunderstand point is that bishops don't matter if nothing is happening on their diagonals. I think sometimes I've seen like a couple of beginners try way too hard to make their like opponent's bishops do nothing by like staying off the diagonal, but then you kind of just end up playing in a really awkward way to kind of feel smart, and then at some point you still have to like trade that bishop for something. Of course, sometimes it's an idea, and that's kind of why I've written this here. But what I'm saying is like sometimes you kind of give away too much, like make so many like unnecessary knight moves to avoid a bishop or something, when you should just accept that the bishop is good and try to trade for it or something. But sometimes like a bishop can look like absolutely amazing, but if it's doing nothing about the position, who's gonna care? And that's kind of a point about opposite color bishops, where like of course in endgames opposite color bishops are like very commonly a drawing tool, like if you have a bishop on different colored squares than your opponents. But different colored bishops, when one player is attacking, are like favor the attacker, as far as I remember, at least theoretically, because you like one of your opponent's pieces isn't able to influence one of your pieces, or so to speak. So it's kind of a example of when bishops don't matter even if they look good. If like all the action is on dark squares, for example, and you only have a light squared bishop.
Definitely.
Buried bishops are somewhat more rare than knights, but they are like really sad when they get buried. And there was an example in the lesson I did with Leocarle, where his bishop just got like absolutely buried on the corner of the board, and it was like never able to get back in the game, and he lost terribly, as far as I remember at least. Opposite color bishops are a draw. Well, of course, like that's only a generalization of a like common principle. It doesn't like opposite color bishops don't always mean a draw. But there was a funny endgame that I played where my opponent could have sacked like 2 or 3 pawns and been like down 2 or 3 pawns and still had a draw. And that was like a drawing line, was to sacrifice all of those pawns, because we had opposite color bishops and it could hold all of them, and there were no other like pieces on the board. Fianchetto bishops can suck. I think that's like something that you learn pretty early on, is that like fianchetto bishops are strong, and that's why so many beginners really love that. And they are strong if the diagonal ever opens, but if they don't, they can just be terrible. And that's kind of why the King's Indian is, or one of the reasons why the King's Indian is a problematic opening for beginners, is that often you're like, when you think about the King's Indian, if you don't know the right pawn breaks and so forth, like which ones of your pieces are actually good, because your dark squared bishop is staring at your e5 pawn, your light squared bishop has no squares, your f6 knight has no squares, and your other knight has to take like 7 moves to maneuver into a game, at least as far as I know, and in my experience in the King's Indian, which is limited, but anyway, like the fianchetto bishop can become a total monster, but you really need to work for it and know the right pawn breaks and so forth.
Yeah, definitely.
And single pawn moves can make terrible bishops into terrific ones, which is very different from really any other piece in that sense, because bishops can go from like completely buried to having at least one amazing diagonal. Like imagine in this example on the board that I guess we should turn sync on. In the number 10 position, or the first test position, like if the e5 pawn wasn't there, that bishop would be like amazing, but the e5 pawn is there, so sometimes it's kind of especially in very kind of maneuvering positional games, you might think like, okay, my opponent's bishop is like absolutely god awful, but then you like allow one pawn move, and then it's like suddenly the best piece on the board, and it's a like very fine balance in my experience. At least it's kind of like compared to knights. Of course, sometimes you like the reason a knight is bad is that it has no like forward squares and it's dominated, and then you allow one square for it with pawn move, but your opponent like it's more difficult for your opponent to kind of make that happen. You have to kind of make it happen by moving your own pawns, like typically, to allow your opponent to get a better knight, and knights can like maneuver and so forth. So it's I think slightly more subtle there, but if you allow like one pawn move, a bishop can suddenly be like a complete beast. So yeah.
Exactly.
There's an example in the book of a game where like one player has a like absolutely god awful bishop, but then like there are so many like easy ways to allow it out of the cage and let it become like at least a passable piece. And like in the Benoni, I think there are like I remember there were a lot of examples in chess structures when I was reading about the Benoni in preparation for my game against Shizan, that like if white allows the bishop, light squared bishop, black. If white allows black's light squared bishop to jump onto a6, suddenly it can become like a pretty good piece, and or at least be traded off for a useful knight. So it's like again just examples of bishops suddenly becoming very useful if you just don't play very accurately.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I have for notes. I guess we can then move on to the tests.
All right.
You want to go first on this one, because I remember like I'm pretty sure my answer is like completely us, and I remember when I did this before I didn't quite get it either.
Okay, so I think I wanted to take on d5.
Yeah, me too. That's at least one of the
With
options.
the idea that this bishop is really hampered by all these pawns, not
Yeah.
really active, especially
Yeah.
if we have to move it back. And this knight's pretty good, so I thought we'd take it.
Yeah, and I imagine probably c takes. Is it which is better, because e takes looks like the f pawn gets stranded. Well, I guess.
Okay, so
I guess like if e takes, like how is black going to really win that one, or like you can always trade it for the g pawn, right? If black doesn't initiate the trade.
okay, so let's imagine c takes, I guess, to keep this pawn strong.
Yeah.
Here I thought the bishop on g2 was a tall pawn, as
Yeah,
Tillman
that's
called
true,
it,
actually.
where it's stuck behind its own pawns and has no future really. Our bishop
Yeah.
also isn't very good, but if we can trade these two somehow, then I think black has a pleasant game with the two knights against.
Yeah. Something I was
bishop.
kind of worried about were like ideas related to bishop h6 and f6. I don't know if there's like concrete way to make that happen, but it feels like there could be some nastiness related to that in some lines, because if you can't run from g7, so you'd have to trade the bishops, and after that if you get f6 in, which could be actually difficult because the knight controls f6 for now, at least. Just something I was kind of wondering about, but then the knight can't move, so it could be awkward. But anyway, at this point black has to play... Wait, actually, what about knight d4 here?
I also thought knight d4 indeed.
I was thinking about some retreating move before, but actually now that I look at this looks like it's way more sensible. I didn't really feel like I had a sensible answer for this. I thought like taking was not necessarily mandatory, but retreating with the bishop looked like very awkward. You want to trade pieces because you're down in space, which is, I think, a useful principle. And I don't see a way in which you're getting murdered here, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that would be my assessment that I would just take and see what happens afterwards, because, yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
And I also thought about like taking first on f5 here. I don't know if it actually make any kind of sense, but the idea being takes.
No. Here I take with the bishop. And now
Oh,
the
right.
bishop.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah, I guess that makes sense then, that this variation is bad.
Yeah,
Or
I
if
think
you-
that's quite honest, really.
Or if you retreat, but again, then
But
like,
even like now, the bishop is good.
yeah, that's true. That is true. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So I imagine they're supposed to take, because how are you kind of even playing this position? Otherwise, you just have like zero space.
Yeah, exactly. And the bishop isn't good anyway. So
Yeah, I
we're
guess.
active as Dylan said.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess let's have a look at what Tillman says about
Yeah.
this one. I should look at the test again. Part 4 and this tests. No, it's somewhere in here.
Okay, so Silman says that after bishop d5,
Which page is it?
443.
443, okay. Yeah, I'm there.
So he says that both vd5 and ed5 lead to some favorable squares opening up for white.
Okay.
And that this is overall just pleasant for white. But the problem is that black's already in a dead position. If black moves the bishop back, it's even worse for him. So you kind of have to take on d5, I think.
Yeah, he puts a question mark next to bishop d7.
Yeah, exactly. And he says indeed, bishop d5 followed by a knight d4 had to be tried.
Okay, and there's no... Does it mention anything about concrete lines related to why bishop d7 phase is just conceptual?
Bishop d7 question mark allows
f6.
f6.
I thought it didn't, but I guess it does.
So wait, take. Here's kind of annoying.
Oh, I would have taken intuitive with the knight first. Is there some
Okay, so
reason
if you
not
take
to?
with the knight first,
Yeah.
then still bishop g5.
Oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, okay.
So you can't take f6, and if you can't take f6, then it's over, really.
Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I just discounted f6 immediately.
f6 here, and then the...
Yeah, that looks unpleasant. Yeah.
So yeah, the bishop takes d5 is unpleasant, but you have to play it anyway.
Yeah. That makes sense. Bishop d5 was my first intuition. I didn't know where it led, but otherwise it like felt like, why are we moving a terrible bishop away from a like great knight?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. So bishop d5, and then does he give a... I don't know if he mentions... Oh yeah, this looks fine either way. Probably after this you also go here, right? I don't see a reason not to. Well, anyway, it's just a kind of a conceptual answer of like trading pieces when you're down in space, and then like a concrete refusal to the other idea. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, So the next one, the question given with this position is what factors combine to give black a decisive advantage?
All right.
And I think simply the answer is that his bishop is much better. He has better control over the open files, and like both being able to, which I think is the best move here, shutting down the d file with bishop to d4 and the doubled rooks on the e file, while I don't think there's like notable weakness in his position. And then like the f2 pawn looks like really annoying to handle for white. Like I don't really know how without a million moves you're getting it out of trouble, or like how you're making it so you don't have to babysit for the rest of the game. So yeah, overall just this I think useful tactical technique to kind of being able to plug files. Sometimes you just do it by slamming a minor piece onto a file when it can be contested by opposing pawns or other minor pieces. There's also that game, I think, was it like Anand Grishuk or something? And I don't remember if it was in this chapter, I think it was, but where like, wait, was it Grishuk or Ivanchuk? It might have been Ivanchuk. Well, whatever. The point is that that I think Anand, who was white in that game, I think. Well, anyway, slammed a bishop on like c7, where it wasn't supported, but you couldn't like take it because of tactics, and then he had time to stack rooks on the c file and control the file. So that was another example of it. But this overall is a like very common and useful technique, being able to kind of choose when a file is open or not. And now it's like pretty awkward for white to try to get on the e file, and while that won't necessarily amount to much right now, I mean, isn't he just also up a pawn? Yeah.
Also up a pawn, yeah.
And the majority on the queen side, like away from white's king, will be very useful. So yeah, those are kind of the factors, and after bishop to d4 at least, why I think black is better here.
Yeah,
I don't know if with like super accurate play, would this be considered like drawable or like something like that? But it looks like at least if someone's playing for a win, it's black. And the weaknesses around black's king caused by g6 can't really be abused in any way because there's no like minor pieces with the queen to get on the dark squares.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much what I have for this one. Sounded like you agreed.
I agree.
And Silman says bishop to
exactly
d4, a4, b6. Black's in no hurry since white can't do anything. He has no target to attack in black's position and no means to effect any useful penetration, but wait and hope that his opponent doesn't find a way to break through. When your opponent is helpless, it's always a good idea to tighten the position. b6 takes the pawn away from the white's bishop's there and also gives extra support to c5. Yeah. So I mean the line given is this. I guess this specific example of what I talked about earlier, where you can try to make like your opponent's bishop just not exist on the board by keeping everything on white squares. It's not quite so simple with like stacking rooks and so forth, but fundamentally here it's difficult for the bishop to find a job, whereas the dark squared bishop is always going to be cutting through this diagonal and eyeing this awkward f-pawn and all of that jazz. So overall, it just seems like a horrible position for white. Well, not horrible in the sense that, like, again, I wouldn't assume I was like completely winning here, but in a classical game, I would have like some hopes of converting this at least. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Actually, funny question. Would you consider your chances better in this position if you were playing this in rapid or like blitz or something, or in a very slow classical game? Because kind of the advantage is so minor, like compared to some advantages that happen in like games at our level.
Yeah.
That like you could easily blow this as black, but then again, like so if you were playing a rapid game, you could like just blunder in an exchange in some really silly way, but also like if you are playing rapid or some like just faster time control, this is like really unpleasant to play for white. So sometimes those positions are more difficult in faster time controls because they are like unpleasant and just kind of difficult to play. So like, do you think you would benefit more from this position as black from in a faster time control or classical?
I think in rapid or blitz it would be easier for black because it's harder to defend and it's easier to play as black.
Yeah,
I feel
yeah,
you can just like go here, get the pieces
yeah,
involved.
yeah,
I
and
think, and it's easier for your opponent to blunder here in
yeah.
rapid.
Yeah, I guess black can just chill on the e file and like doesn't really even have to do much. Kind of, you can even like make inconsequential moves a lot of time and kind of put the ball in white court. Whereas in classical, they might find a lot of like hidden resources if they have enough time to think. Yeah, that's just something I think about a decent amount. Both like if a weaker player actually benefits more from blitz or classical, because I feel like in blitz a lot of like like for example, if I play against Halla, who is like 1500, in blitz like it never is like remotely close. She always falls like pretty early in the game. But when you play like classical games, it's much more close, and we can play into an end game where I don't have that much of an advantage. Of course, I could be just playing without too much ambition because of the rating disparity, but it's just like interesting if that even affects it, like the time control. Anyway.
Yeah, that's harder to keep up in faster time.
Yeah. Then again, also you kind of could blunder more, but yeah, I don't know.
That's also true.
So I guess we can move on. This is pretty much solved and clear. This is another one where my answer is probably complete, like horseshit show. So did you have something that you felt reasonably confident in here?
Okay, so the first of all, tall pawn on b7.
Yeah.
But this bishop is very active because pieces don't count as clutter. So
Yeah.
this is basically an open diagonal for the bishop. Our own bishop maybe wants to go here at some point. Because
Go where?
it's controlling like two squares here.
Where does it want to go? I don't see an arrow.
To
Oh,
h3. Yeah. No, not like now, obviously, but at some
Yeah.
point. Then this bishop, I thought just a logical move, bishop f4.
Yeah, it's kind of appealing, right? There's
Yeah, just improves it a lot because here this diagonal doesn't do anything, it's controlling one square.
Yeah.
Here, so this is just much better open still work as well.
Yeah. I remember. Yeah, the thing for with this one, I remember like was there some awkwardness if you play bishop f4 for some reason? Because that's like a really intuitive move, but I remember and it's what I have written down. Like I would definitely play if I was playing like a 15+10, I would just play it without thinking too much about it because it looks like it makes it pretty awkward for black to play. And then there's like if you can slip your bishop into like h3, it becomes like hideously difficult for black to kind of play the position. and you aren't too afraid of like black's. Like I don't even know. Like G6 isn't much of a possibility, and you have stuff like bishop to D6 in your pocket, so you can kind of flip it in there, and then it will be very annoying.
Oh right, yeah. Bishop f4, so here.
And then it would retreat to
here, and then here.
Yeah, I don't know if you have to do it immediately, right?
Yeah, not immediately, but like in the future, this is a massacre.
But I'm wondering about like, well, no, there's no like d4 at some point from black, but I don't see how. Anyway, yeah, bishop f4 would be my move, and I wouldn't think too much about it even in a classical game. I don't see a very concrete reason not to do it, and it seems like a path to a very strong outpost.
Yeah,
and you should be able to control like e4, so the knight can't really challenge it, I guess.
And it's probably like bishop f8, and he trades it. But
yeah.
We trade this active bishop here for our originally
kind of
not
mediocre
very active bishop here. Yeah.
Well, I guess it's already fine in the original position, but it becomes a very, very strong piece later on.
Yeah.
But I just remember Silman said like something else should be played first or something. But yeah.
That does sound like something someone would say.
Yeah. And I guess it also feels natural because defends the e-pawn, so I guess... what else?
The e-pawn, so the knight is free to move and such, yeah.
Yeah. I was it like e4 first for some weird reason? Because like e4... d4 knight e2 is fine for white, right? e4 takes, I guess knight takes.
Yeah.
And I don't see a problem there, and I that might have been it. I don't remember, and this is kind of me trying to half remember and half trying to logic it, but I think it could have been e4 first for some reason. Like I guess specifically that you left some variation with like d4 for some reason. Like maybe when if rook captures after that. Well, but can't you also play like bishop a4, rook e8? Isn't rook e8 kind of forced?
Yeah.
Otherwise, like if rook e7, then bishop d6.
Now we're just up a tempo from the original.
Yeah, and you can't stay on white side of the board. Because like otherwise it just gets kicked around and or skewered to the queen, I think.
Yeah, exactly. The rook can't go here or here.
Yeah. And also like h5 just isn't there. Wasn't it like getting like... I don't think it's getting trapped there, but there was something like I thought bishop f3 was annoying or something.
Bishop f3.
Isn't
then
it?
I go here.
Wait, but if...
Oh yeah, wait, here.
And it's trapped,
Oh, but the bishop on f4 had.
Actually, no, wait, how does this work? Well, anyway, but I still wouldn't like this for black, because I think now the rook is kind of looking awkward.
I agree, yeah, the rook doesn't really want to be
and you have to like watch out for these ideas.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll mark this one as dubious, and this one as brilliant because it's my move. No, but yeah. Well, I guess let's see the answer, because I can't like. I don't think I'll find too much more from this position.
All right. Bishop f4 is tempting, but the main concern is that the g2 bishop isn't active.
Okay.
So indeed, e4 is the best move.
Yeah, and yeah. So the line he gives is e4 takes, knight takes. What then? knight takes, bishop takes.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. And visually this does look better, I guess. Like
That's true. Yeah.
now again, you like have bishop a4 at some point if like black doesn't move it out of his own volition, and then like you have a really solid control over the fifth rank, and you have bishops blocking his rook, and possibly like f3. Yeah, I don't know if there's a solid way to keep black's queen on c8 somehow, which would be attractive because then the bishop will find it very difficult to find a home, and so forth. So I guess that's kind of one of those things where you just kind of leave it be, and it will like over time just kind of gather. Wait, why does it look like this on my OBS? Let me just fix this real quick. Now it should look okay again. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I guess e4 is just a so e4 is like an improvement and a not notable improvement, but not like f4 seems also fine to me. I would intuitively feel like using the queen to control the h3 c8 diagonal would be like slightly awkward. I don't know if you actually have any way to like slip a queen or something to support the bishop. But
I was also thinking about that, yeah, but that's a little bit hard to do.
Yeah, it's very slow, and I guess there's stuff like knight e2, knight f4, bishop h3 maybe.
Yeah, but I understand that this is probably a better and simpler way to get the bishop on attack.
Yeah, but I was just trying to figure out if in bishop f4 the bishop is just like bad forever, but yeah, this seems like just an obvious improvement once you see it. Okay, I guess moving on to the next one, since this one seems pretty much solved, or at least like read from the test solutions. Yeah, number 13. This one I thought was also like pretty obvious, right?
Okay.
Like, don't you just slam this bishop to e3 and say, okay, what are your light squared pieces doing
right,
here?
Because black was threatening to play e3.
Yeah.
Next
and then, and I think like overall you're just in trouble there, or like this shuts down a lot of black's play for now, and then obviously black could play for c4, but then do you have knight c3? And isn't white completely fine here? Now it feels like the pawns are kind of overreaching, but
that's true.
I wonder about knight e2, and then there are like, and now obviously bishop c5, bishop takes, queen takes or something. No, actually pawn takes, right? If bishop c5, I think you can just like play knight g3 or something, and either rook takes.
Yeah.
And now again, it's very difficult to use light squared bishop or something like this. This is actually, I would intuitively, of course, want to take here, and play something like this. But again, that runs into trouble, maybe. Well, not actually, but you kind of allow activity for like poor reasons, I suppose.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of one thing about chess that I'm trying to figure out is like advanced pawns, are they like good or not? Because in this position there is no majority, so I guess that's kind of when I was looking at Benoni, I kind of was surprised by how annoying the queenside pawns can be, but they are in a majority in the Benoni, whereas here they aren't, and there's like the queen is supporting them, but I think you can just lock the pawn structures. But then there's like tactics around that possibly. So it's just something that I'm kind of trying to figure out how that like really works. But I think here they just become weaknesses if you try to push them too much.
That's true. Yeah.
So yeah, I think bishop e3 is like, if you see it, it seems like automatic at that point.
Makes most sense. Yeah.
And you kind of fix the pawn on e4, so it's always blocked by this, and you don't allow any like e3 shenanigans. Did you have something else?
I didn't. No.
So okay, yeah, bishop e3. This blocks the e pawn, which in turn makes sure that the h1 a8 diagonal won't become a factor in the subsequent play. And it says queen f6, which is sensible. I was kind of just trying to figure out how black would go about straighting the bishops. What does he say after c3 if they're like...
Bishop d6.
Okay, that makes sense.
Here.
Do you play like g3?
G3. 6. a4. This is the line they give.
Yeah. Okay, I mean, that makes sense. Yeah, and I guess here black's pawn structure gets kind of shattered.
Yeah.
I mean, be that as it may, overall just the bishop e3 line, like noticing bishop to e3 is the most important.
Yeah, that's the most important part. I agree.
Yeah. Okay, and that like seemed to be pretty much what he says. Like bishop to e3 is like the essential thing, and then he has like 17 pages of like analysis about things that don't matter anymore at all. But that's kind of what Silman does.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's always like a pain to try to figure out like is any of this relevant, but then he like analyzes the entire game, and then like nobody's going to read that anyway. Yeah, number 14, I suppose. All this was I think the rating he gives for this one makes no sense.
Does it make sense or does make sense?
It doesn't make any sense, like because it's 2100 and up. But I think the idea is like pretty obvious, right? Especially because it's in the bishop chapter. Because like I at least remember that this is correct, and I figured it out pretty quickly in the first run. While I get a lot of these incorrect, because your bishop is like absolute garbage, and then you start looking at it and say, hey, there's a nice diagonal here, and well, there's these pawns hanging here, so why not like do something like this? And that starts looking like very nasty pretty quickly, right? The only question,
so probably here is the
just the tactical reasoning, and then if takes,
yeah, of course, yeah.
But then the question is, what if black doesn't take, and I didn't really like try to. Oh, you have to take because the knight hangs then.
Yeah.
And this doesn't pose a threat because it's defended twice. So.
Exactly. Yeah.
And this like well, I don't know, maybe it's of course possible that you would miss this in a game, but I thought this was like pretty easy compared to a lot of stuff he calls like 100 or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's see if I'm completely incorrect, as per usual. Let's see, number 14.
Yeah, E6, brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, of course it's like a move that's pretty difficult to see in game if you aren't like actively looking for something like that.
The follow-up, bishop b5.
Right.
Now what do you play?
Take the knight and call it a good trade. Don't you have like queen takes d5?
E5?
I mean, Yeah, I mean queen takes, bishop, queen takes, and then d5.
d5, r7, then it takes here.
Okay, I guess it's...
And this is completely devastating. So.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems obvious, like, this diagonal opening will be, like, catastrophical. For...
Yeah, exactly.
And, like, even if you move away here, like, I thought it could be okay to just sacrifice the exchange or something, because you, like, if the queen moves, and which we force here by taking on b5, like, is he gonna babysit that diagonal for the rest of the game? Well, anyway, maybe like this variation would be a refutal if like queen takes b5 wasn't strong, but anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another far simpler win was queen to c4, bishop e6, queen takes d5. Let's see. So queen to c4, bishop e6, and takes d5. And what was the idea then? I mean, probably takes back and... wait, what? Bishop takes, and then e6. And that's looking annoying to play as well.
Yeah, I placed the rook to e5 at some point.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
And he also says that here you don't have to give up the queen, you can just play queen d2.
Yeah.
And it's still winning.
Yeah. Or it just looks like one of those positions where like black needs like 7 moves to solve all his problems, and he doesn't have 7 moves, so...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I guess moving on to the next one.
Yeah.
Here, the only move
I remember this
one. That really like jumped out to me was that, well, your bishop is doing a very impressive pawn impression, and
exactly, yeah.
there are all of these like free range light squares here that you could jump onto with like bishop c2 and bishop a4.
Yeah, that's my plan as well.
Bishop e5. No, sorry. b5 isn't a possibility at any point, I don't think. And
yeah.
And like rook b8 doesn't seem to allow it either.
No, you control that. You control b5 enough times, I think.
So even if this...
Take with...
Well, probably take with the knight.
It doesn't matter, yeah.
I mean, my idea is that if you trade like this, you end up with a very annoying knight here. And if you take with the knight, I wonder if there's anything to do with the pin here, but is there?
Always.
Oh, yeah, sure.
It's both. It looks good.
Yeah, or just the idea of trading like for this absolute monster bishop here, which is controlling these diagonals, and getting rid of one of your pawns. Yeah, I mean that seems pretty clear to me as well. I don't think like initially I started thinking about like b4, but then like those ideas started seeming nonsensical because your c4 pawn isn't weak, I don't think, and yeah, this is just like much better. And yeah, you get rid of one piece blocking your knights and get some squares for your knights. And knight b5 seems like, if not like completely unthinkable, it seems pretty like very like poor, because then your opponent has a protected passer for the endgame and your pawn structure is worse and all of that jazz. So it doesn't seem like a very strong try either, even if the bishop that gets traded off for it is a very strong piece. Simon says, where is it? Here. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Bishop c2, preparing to exchange the lousy bishop for black's active one via bishop a4, and then queen e7 as the continuation, which is like reasonable. I guess a lot of time when I try to look for the continuations from, and what it gives here is just this. And while the knight is now kind of awkward, maybe you can play for like either just return back, and now this black position is completely playable, whereas before your bishop was just so god awful that you didn't want to deal with any of that. But yeah, I guess a lot of time the variations that I give you is like how would how would the opponent prevent the like your idea instead of like necessarily the like absolute best move, whereas like queen e7 is like I at least hope it's the best move. If Silman says it is, it's like doesn't do much about the situation at all. So I don't like consider that sort of move, I guess, unless it's like a strong counter attack. Yeah. So this seems like a fairly good solution. This one I remember I got this wrong last time, and even now I'm like not sure at all about my answer. I want to play like, well, what did you have here?
I'm not sure if I remember any good ideas I had here.
Yeah, the intuitive like bishop e4 fails to knight takes.
But then exactly this, yeah. I remember seeing that. Yeah.
And now you're kind of hating your life. You can't even do like, well, you can move the. Well, no, the opponent is forking like these kind of ideas, and then your d pawn is tender, and the position is just horrible. Of course, you're also down a pawn, so. Yeah, so my idea was to prepare it with this, and I didn't see a good way for black to make anything happen with the knight move. Like, this doesn't seem to work on any level. And otherwise you just capture it. And like knight a5 is a nothing burger of a move. So I didn't see at least any concrete way, and I kind of like this idea of bishop e4 coming here. I guess then black can play f5, but I think you could be fine here with g3, because your knight could aim for a lot of weaknesses, either through here.
Yeah.
Or through here or whatever, and your opponent's knight is kind of limited. Maybe there's e5.
Yeah.
But I wonder then about like that looks a bit too committal, but just some ideas I had for the position, like knight d2 at least seems like passable, and I don't see like a tactical refutation to it.
I agree with 92.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the position is about this whole kind of pin, or whatever you would call it, kind of having your pawn and king be married to your knight, and all of that jazz. So yeah, and Silman says g4.
G4.
I guess this is like one of those difficult to find.
So the idea is g5
to pin down the weaknesses.
Yeah, to really weaken these pawns, I guess.
Yeah, but
kind of.
What about h6? What's wrong with h6?
h6 is indeed the move that he gives. h6, h4.
Yeah, I guess.
And now trade here.
Okay.
And I guess you're just very happy.
Yeah. I guess that makes sense. Is the idea like your knight is closer to your like opponent's weak points and so forth. I intuitively don't really understand why this is so good, but I guess it's a creative way to get rid of like potentially annoying stuff, like just overall the potential pawn pushes and like fixing his pawn structure in a beneficial way on the king side. Yeah, this one is weird. I wonder.
Okay, so what I think the point is, he wants to fix all the black pawns on light squares.
Yeah.
Because they'll all be targets for our bishop.
Yeah, that
From
makes
what I
sense.
understand, that's mostly the point. And he also says that this is about finding subtle ways to create things that don't yet exist. So
Yeah.
it's very advanced. And he also, this was like 2100 plus, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of what I mean, that like the earlier one seemed reasonably quick to figure out, and I'm like famously weak tactically. So I wouldn't consider myself like a tactical beast that finds these things often. But this one feels like very like kind of ethereal, I suppose. Like it's very difficult to see this idea. Again, it's kind of it's very difficult for me to approach these as I would approach positions in a game, because in games you spend so much time thinking about like even like your opponent's kingside pawns and potential like ideas there, whereas when you just look at a position, there's like so much information to take in and so many potential ideas that you haven't been considering because you haven't been playing the position, that it's like somewhat difficult to kind of just figure that stuff out, like from a position, unless you sink like a lot of time into it. Yeah, but this is a creative and kind of instructive idea. Yeah, I kind of remember that like here my ideas sucked, and that there was like some weird idea on the king side to do something about this. But yeah, I guess it's a good lesson on prophylaxis in a sense, or not necessarily prophylaxis, but like really long-term thinking.
It's definitely a long-term thing. Like when after you trade all the rooks, the pawns are a bit weak and easy target with your knight and such.
Yeah,
that's definitely long-term.
Yeah, then again, it does look like silly to have a like. Was the line that he gave? Well, he didn't give.
Knight a5. Here, I think.
Yeah, this pawn does look isolated, but I guess like it's very difficult to abuse because
the pawn's going to f4 maybe.
Yeah, and this just like is obviously very, very, very bad.
Yeah.
I wonder. Let's actually check with. I don't think he mentions knight d2.
No, he only goes g4.
Okay, I guess let's have a look if there's like. Here says, he says, Ancient says g4 is best, and knight d2 is actually. It just the Ancient can't design, but it looks like it says it's like playable, but now it's just a draw. At some point it says like minus point something, but obviously this is an end game and it won't understand anything about this until like my depth 50 or something. But yeah, I guess that would be the fine move. Just g4 is more ambitious, and here Engine wants to play f6, which seems like similar. No wait, but then. And then if you play this, I guess, okay, this seems weirder and kind of worse for white than the example, but maybe there are ideas of like h4 or something. Well, h4, h5 takes, and you have like nothing there unless you play like rook h1 or something. It's kind of difficult to figure out without like a lot of time, but
What happened? You did f6.
Oh wait, he did give a.
You gave f5 immediately, I think.
Yeah.
There's an
Does it?
option, then take, and then come in here.
What about e takes? Is there something super wrong with this? Because this is definitely what I would into. Oh, but then yeah, just passer.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always seem to undervalue passers. There are like a lot of lines in the Karakan where I like. Obviously, I don't play the Karakan anymore. At least haven't for a while, except in like some random bullet games when I'm really tilted. But it's like. Well, you know, when you're trying to switch repertoires and you keep losing and then, oh, fuck it, I'm just gonna play Karakan. But I often lose games where, like, when you end up in, like, is the Carl's bad? I should remember pawn structure better, but the point is, like, when you end up in a position where you have, like, on your queen, not your queen side as black, you have like your a pawn and c pawn and d pawn, and your pawns are on a7, c6 and d5, and then like your opponent has like a b c d pawns, and then like at some point you just get buried under passers. And I lost quite a few games that way in some variation, but I don't remember which. Well, anyway, just rambling on about random Karakan games that happened like a year ago. This now that I look at this, it's very like obvious. It's one of my weaknesses, which I should fix at some point by reading the Shankland book on like which I own, but I have so many books that I should read. Which is on Pawn Play. Was it like Tiny Steps to Trying to Improvement or whatever it was, which is like such a typical American title for a book. But anyway, yeah. So like in endgames there are like always so many like random pawn pushes that are so difficult to like calculate accurately and like even consider, because like if you look at this position, obviously there are like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pawn moves, which like some of which are obviously like very poor, but it's not so easy to kind of verbalize why you wouldn't consider h4 or h3 or g3 or so forth. So like I guess I'm just trying to say it's like difficult for me to kind of discount pawn moves in the endgame, and like very often when I look at more advanced players, I see like pawn moves that would have never like in a million years occurred to me. And I guess it's one of those things where as a beginner, like people move completely random pawns when they don't have anything else to do, and you kind of try to avoid that, but you know. Anyway, yeah. So I guess looking at our solutions, this one we both said bishop takes d5. So I guess this was more like mostly correct.
Yeah.
Number 10.
Number 10 we got it correct.
Number 11 we both got it right, I think.
Yeah, d4 is right, yeah.
Number 12 was like reasonably close to truth. Let's say inaccurate, I guess. At least for me.
Oh right, yeah, because e4 instead of bishop4.
Yeah. And here bishop e3.
Bishop e3 was correct.
Yeah. Also creating this is kind of difficult because you don't know if you should take all of the like variation into account, but I don't typically think like much deeper than 1 or 2 moves. I tend to be like a very like heuristic based as a player, so I like don't consider like I don't typically calculate that much. I mean, obviously during games I look at a couple of moves from my opponent, but kind of solve these things by looking at the position and getting a feel for it. So
Right.
14 was, I think, correct-ish, because
We found d6.
yeah,
We missed bishop b5.
yeah, I like figured that there's no way like black isn't getting murdered here. I didn't see this, so it's like one of those things where in a puzzle there's like some line that is marked down as essential, but which you missed, but then you also like don't think that line is problematic, and you kind of intuitively would dismiss it possibly.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a problem a lot of time. This one we got correct, which is kind of a problem for me in Woodpecker sometimes, because they sometimes it's variations that don't seem very like intuitively harmful to me.
Oh, I have the same thing.
What did you have for number 16? Did you have move
Oh,
marked
I
down?
think I was also considering something like knight d2 to set up bishop d4. Yeah, I did see g4.
Okay, move not the answer, I guess, because like
Yeah.
well, I guess we can like it's kind of marks like even if the move doesn't like ponder material, I don't. Because
Yeah,
you should
traditional.
be honest enough to say that it just wasn't correct. But yeah,
Yes.
it was a fine move, but like playable in like at least faster time control. But yeah, so I guess we did okay. Like some inaccuracy in calculation and so forth, but the ideas seem to be generally correct, which would be desirable since we've gone through this before and so forth. But
Yeah.
yeah, seemed like that was okay. Not that much that we like really struggled with. Yeah. Sorry about all the delays. Scheduling was kind of difficult, but there's a lot of stuff going on.
Oh no, I completely understand.
Sure. Yeah. I guess we'll try to do rooks. No, sorry, bishops and knights for next week or next month or whenever we get it scheduled.
Yeah.
Yeah. Will you say hi to YouTube this time?
All right.
I guess
YouTube?
there we go. Hi YouTube from me as well. Okay, guess we'll end it there. Bye YouTube.